Hello, Africa and the world. Thank you, Mansley, for joining us on this weekend edition of Talking Point over your #1 Pan-African channel. As the artificial intelligence AI wave sweeps across the globe, Africa finds itself at the forefront of a transformative moment that has the potential to reshape the continent's developmental trajectory. As home to the world's youngest and fastest growing population, Africa's youth will form one of the world's largest workforces by the year 2030. In the wake of this change, it is imperative to examine how the world would position, the continent's youth to leverage AI to transform lives and power economies. AI holds the promise of creating jobs, fostering innovation and expanding access to essential as what noting that the effective deployment of AI technologies necessitates strategic investments in ICT infrastructure, including high-speed internet connectivity, data centers and cloud computing capabilities. This thus requires African governments, institutions and the private sector to channel resources into AI research and development. Africa must position itself to actively engage in shaping global decisions or discussions on AI and contribute to the development of context-specific data and guidelines. Well, as the world witnesses the rise of AI, Africa's youth will have to embrace its potential, positioning themselves as trailblazers of innovation and change. As the topic goes thus, AI and productivity, what impact would these have on the reasoning faculty or IQ of Africa's youth? Ladies and gentlemen, if you're just joining us, this is Talking Point over your Pan-African channel. Stay with us. Hello, ladies and gentlemen. If you're just tuning in, this is your true weekly program Talking Point over your Pan-African channel, where we get to discuss matters affecting the African continent and beyond. Like we mentioned, today we're focusing on AI and productivity on the African continent. We're asking the question what impact it will have on the IQ of Africa's youth. And to discuss this very pertinent topic over your Pan-African channel, ladies and gentlemen, we shall take you straight to Russia, where we are joined by KOHTEM PRINCEWIL SAMBIT, who happens to be a youth leader that embodies the Cameroon Youth Parliamentarian 2024, the national president of Commonwealth Students Union. He's equally the executive director of Build Assemble a civil society organization, and a researcher doing his PhD. Greetings to you, sir. You're welcome on board. Greetings, Sambit. You're welcome to today's edition.
Thank you very much for having me on your program. It will always be a pleasure for me to be on your program, especially when we're talking about very important aspects that has to do across Africa, and particularly the young people. It will always be, like I said it before, it will always be a pleasure for me to be able to share my own point of view, and also for the voices of the young people when we have to talk about very pertinent issues like this. So as we unfold the program, we'll be having more insight as to what we have to say. So hello and good afternoon to the other panelists, and hello to all your televiewers. Thank you very much for having me.
Thank you immensely for honoring the invitation. We're equally joined by Dr. Stanley FONGOD, who is a Pan-Africanist and he doubles as a TECHPRENEUR. Greetings to you, sir. You're welcome once again.
Thank you so much for having me, Sharon, and thank my co-panelists for joining as well, and our viewers and those who will be viewing this subsequently as well. Thank you for coming and logging on.
Exactly. Thank you for honoring the invitation. Just to reiterate that you're watching us on 4U television. You're equally listening to us over the airways of FM 96.3 4U radio, your Pan-African radio, and we're streaming on our respective social media platforms. So I'll direct this first question to you, Sambit or PRINCEWIL. Now, in your opinion, being a youth leader, how do you evaluate this impact of artificial intelligence on the youth of Africa?
Now, it is, you know, Africa as a continent, talking about artificial intelligence as I want to say some part of Africa, because if we want to talk about Africa, it is sometimes it's not good to globalize it, because you want to look at the sub-Saharan Africa and the Maghreb and the like, so you may really want to distinguish them, because the level of technological advancement in these parts of Africa are not the same. But if we want to go in a whole, then we should be looking at artificial intelligence in a way where we want to see its development over a period of time has been, it is moving in a pace where we may be tempted to say that it is gaining grounds, but not like in other parts of the world. But young people in Africa have to put a lot of energy, need to put a lot of concentration on this, because artificial intelligence is what is gaining ground today in the world, and it is the world of tomorrow, or if you want to say the world of today and tomorrow, which is really portrayed most part of, you want to talk about the economy, you want to talk about even the social aspect, it all includes artificial intelligence, because artificial intelligence is playing a very big role. Looking at the level of the economy, industries, companies, most of these issues are really being taken into consideration with artificial intelligence. I want to tell you, the World Youth Festival just ended some few days in Russia, and youths around the world converged where they were looking at issues that has to do with young people and the world of tomorrow, where the world of today and the world of tomorrow. And artificial intelligence was one of those things that were at the forefront. And I want to say in Europe, like in most part of the world, it is something which has really gained ground and it's been very much looked upon. But unlike in Africa, it is still, well, I want to say the idea is still gaining ground. But the young people, the entrepreneurs and the young people in Africa needs to be aware of this. Those who are aware need to put more energy, they need to put more focus to see how they can also abreast it and see how it can be of more importance to them.
Exactly. Thank you immensely for that brilliant preamble there, KOHTEM. Now over to you, Dr. Stanley. Now as a techpreneur or a tech expert, how do you assess the overview of the impact of artificial intelligence on the youth of the African continent?
I think that it's quite early for us to basically give any kind of an assessment, and reasons being that we are at its infancy so far as artificial intelligence is concerned. We are literally just at the beginning of it. The artificial intelligence, you know, worldwide is basically at its budding stage. So the reality is we really do not have the data. We do not know a whole lot more about its influence and how it's going to be able to shape our society. Talk less about, you know, developed nations where the infrastructure is there to literally be able to collect data and monitor what is going on. But first of all, for us to even have this in context, we need to be able to understand that we have literally leapfrogged a lot on the African continent when it comes to technology. The whole industrial, our lives, you know, as the human race began evolving when we basically started with the first industrial revolution. That's when mankind was able to get into the areas of machinery, steam engine. We came within the second industrial revolution, where it was all about electricity, you know, and then we had some kind of automation with the third industrial revolution with electronics and integrated circuit. The fourth industrial revolution came along with cybersecurity and, you know, the Internet of all things. And now we are literally, you know, at the tail end of the fourth industrial revolution, which basically, so far as I'm concerned, is more of the fifth industrial revolution, which is basically evolving out of the Internet of all things into artificial intelligence. So the reality is there's a lot of infrastructure that needs to be on the ground on the African continent for us to understand and fully be able to assess and know exactly, you know, how beneficial this will be for us. But there are tell signs as to how great these systems will be on the African continent, and I pray that, you know, the African youth will be able to get into this early, because early adopters and those who basically lead the way, especially with artificial intelligence, will create the narrative for the future.
Exactly. Now, I recall we had KOHTEM that actually cited a lot of impactful things that the world is actually embracing this wave of artificial intelligence on the African continent. Now, direct me to the next question to you, KOHTEM. Now, with that in mind, we've seen countries like Kenya that have been welcoming these new wave of technology in its own country. And now we're asking the question, what impact would this have on the productivity or the reasoning faculty of the youth in the country as well as the continent?
Yeah, like I really want to join my voice again with what Dr. Stanley actually said. We can't really assess it at this point, but those countries who are actually abreast in it, like you not only want to cite Kenya, you look at the case of Rwanda. There are other countries who are actually gradually welcoming it, but we have to look at the way from the perspective that from its benefit. What are the benefits of artificial intelligence? What is it going to benefit of African people? Is the African community ready for it? Because its implementation does not just need a particular area. We need to look at the area where it suits enough for it to be implemented. So, do you have companies? Do you have services that requires artificial intelligence? Now, if you don't have those facilities, those infrastructures that artificial intelligence needs to work on, so you realize that it may be a little bit difficult for your environment to be able to welcome it. So the environment may be some sort of hostile to it if it is not ready to welcome this new world technology that is moving on. So the evaluation at this point may not really, that is why I really want to join my voice with that of Dr. Stanley, that we may not really want to evaluate that much at this time. But we need to put the infrastructure and the facilities that we're talking about, logistics, that needs to welcome this new world order in these communities.
Exactly, and now we mentioned in our preamble, it is left for the government to bring about or creating credible institutions, credible infrastructures that will go along. We'll recall that just yesterday we had the Kenyan government that signed a memorandum of understanding with the United Arab Emirates in the bid to construct a data center in the East African country. Now, like you mentioned, some sort of facilities need to be put in place for these to become a reality, because like you asked the question, is Africa actually ready for such a technology? And now I'll take this next question to you, Dr. Stanley. Now, with that in mind, could you evaluate some of the positive aspects of artificial intelligence? Why we're reiterating, is Africa actually ready for such a technology?
Well, Africa, as far as infrastructure is concerned, Africa is nowhere close to being ready. But you cannot underestimate our ability to be able to innovate in the face of difficulty. I think that there are a lot of startups on the African continent, which is a testament to the fact of the human will, so far as the African is concerned, that we are willing to do whatever it takes for us to be able to emerge. Artificial intelligence needs a lot of processing power. We're talking about supercomputers, and none of us there's just literally no supercomputer, on the African continent. Basically about maybe 30 kilometers away from one, which is basically at UCLA in the city of Los Angeles, California. And that's one of the only supercomputers, that I know out here. But you need these robust systems. And the reasons for that is because for artificial intelligence to work, there's something called machine learning, which is basically where you fit in a lot of data into this algorithm that is written, and then the systems begins to learn and create patterns. It's like a statistical analysis. It looks weave through the data, understands the data, and then be able to make informed decisions based upon the data that is input into the system. So first of all, on the African continent, we really need to be able to do a whole lot more. We have to be able to create the narratives, because if the data that is input into these computer systems is not of our own origin or our own making, we will always be subservient in the future to the biases of those who create these systems in the first place. And I think that one of the issues with ChatGPT and a whole lot of other AI applications, in the US, it's based on that. And if you see groups or countries basically stating that they need to be able to have some kind of a transformative write-up, which is basically some kind of a charter, which we have one, that basically states the parameters to which these systems have been developed is as a result of its inherent bias, as a result of the writers or those who basically create or write the code. So it's important that we on the African continent and African youths understand that there's an arm race when it comes to us getting in first or writing the codes, writing it according to our culture, our perspective as Africans. If that is not the case, and if there be any case tomorrow where an artificial intelligence system, maybe a super AI, will basically decide, you know, what we do, how we do it, and sometimes it might be enforced with the barrel of a gun. So we need to be able to come in early and create those narratives. Use case scenarios, we're looking at agriculture, you know, healthcare, education. There are a lot of other services on the African continent, you know, that will be able to benefit from artificial intelligence. But first, we need data centers, we need supercomputers, and we need to be able to have internet connectivity that is fast enough to be able to process data quickly, and then so that these systems can make informed decisions as to, you know, what needs to be done to benefit these different sectors.
Exactly. Now, still on the advantages, KOHTEM, now evoking this as a youth, you are a youth leader, like we mentioned. Now, in this digital era, what plus do youths bring to the table in terms of decision making to foster Africa's development?
You know, that is a timely question. What plus do youths actually bring to the table? You know, the youth in Africa belongs to that category of people who are, some of them say they are the future, but the future doesn't only depend on the youth, because I'm of that school of thought who believe in intergenerational equity, you know, where the AG will also have to mentor the young people to move on. But these young people have the vibrant energy. These young people in Africa, I want to say, they are living up to expectation, but the environment in which they find themselves at times is really a hindrance to them. We want to look at the political environment. There are a lot of young people who have brilliant ideas, a lot of young people who are proposing brilliant ideas, but the political system at times is really a very big hindrance. You've seen places, I would not really want to cite so many of these countries, but there are so many that we all know, where young people are doing all it takes to be at the forefront, but the political system is filled with well, I don't want to say very old people, but brains that are getting tired and are refusing to leave the stage or to even be able to mentor the young people. So you realize that it is not only of the place of the young people, because these young people, they're getting into these positions does not only depend on them, but it also depends on the powers that be and the authorities that are already in place. It is really a very big problem. I want to say young people from Africa, like you, before you took me on this program, of course, you know, my stay in Russia has been due to the World Youth Festival, or the World Youth Conference, where young people around the world, and I want to talk about precisely, we of the African continent who converged over here in Russia had our own meetings, our own conference, that we had to talk about the situation of Africa and our future. I remember President Putin actually said, Africa is the continent for tomorrow. And just like many other presidents are saying, just like many other young people are saying, because today we're no longer looking at fossil fuel, we're no longer looking at some type of raw materials that were being used before in the 19th century, but today we are moving into we're in the digital age, we are into the enlightened age, and most of the components, the raw materials that are needed for this advancement of this new era are materials that are found in Africa. So Africa stands a better place. But how are the resources of Africa being used? How are the young people actually involved in this procedure? How are the young people's future taken into consideration? What are the places of the young people? So you see, there are a lot of questions around this. But young people, I want to tell you, when we sat, we had to evaluate and look at our position, and we understood that as young people, we have a very big role to play, but this role does not only depend on us. However, we must not also remain behind and wait that it should be given to us. We need to take the bull by the horn And I want to tell you that there are a lot of young people who are doing this in terms of the entrepreneurial environment, in terms of the political environment, in terms of the social environment, cultural environment. So the young people, want to say, they're driving this push forward, but they need to do more.
Exactly, the youth of Africa need to do more, and of course the African continent is the continent for the future, the continent for tomorrow. Now, Dr. Stanley, you mentioned, and I quote, Africa is not ready in terms of infrastructure with regards to artificial intelligence. Now, with that in mind, how do you think the continent can revert this in a bit to be able to embrace, because Africa needs to be at a standstill, Africa needs to be at a point where it can be on the discussion table and actually actively take part in decisions that will lead to the development of the continent. So how do Africa work towards achieving, say, these readiness which you're talking about?
I think that countries like Kenya, you know, what I think was mentioned earlier on, it's basically getting things done. And when you start seeing countries like that building data centers, that is where we start. We start by constructing data centers. We need to be able to have massive data to understand patterns, because these AI systems need to be able to read those data so that they can have informed decisions, you know, across the board. So we need to be able to have robust data centers where we have heavy computer systems, you know, but high processing power, so that these artificial intelligence systems can be able to run effectively, smoothly. And then we have, you know, our output data, you know, in, I mean, somewhat real time rather than lacking behind because internet connectivity is not there or because processing power is lacking. We need to be able to have this. And thirdly, I think that if you know anything about artificial intelligence, this is all about data. So if you have a computer system, there's this old saying in the tech world, you know, on the computer, garbage in, garbage out. So the idea is that whatever be the quality of the data that is available, the quality of the data that we input into the system, so will be the quality of the results. And that's why it's not everything that ChatGPT, for example, gives you that is accurate. And so you have to somewhat, you know, try to validate some of those things by resources, because sometimes, you know, the outcome or whatever it is that is spewed out is just not true. It's sometimes just pure garbage. But overall perspective is great because of the sheer volume of data, you know, that ChatGPT has. On the African continent, we have not for the last 100 years have any systems of storing data. If you walk over into any of our buildings, especially in sub-Saharan Africa, you know, cut across from Kenya all the way to Sierra Leone, you realize that most offices, you know, government-run offices still deal with paper. Issues in Nigeria, in Cameroon, folks, I mean, it's quite draconian in their thinking and the processes that they have, especially in running, you know, these offices. We need those things digitalized. We need to be able to have a way in which we can actually, for example, a country like maybe Nigeria, I think they're doing quite well, you know, especially in the digital space. We have a lot of techpreneurs out there who are building AI systems for agriculture. We have folks who are building AI systems, you know, in the finance sector, and a lot of folks are doing great things, you know, in countries like Nigeria, Kenya, the same in like Rwanda. We have Ghana. There are guys working with applications in Ghana that has to do, you know, with agriculture. We have to be able to fully embrace this by first of all building the infrastructure that these systems need to run on. If we build a robust infrastructure, then everything will be okay. With that which, frankly speaking, even the possibility of leapfrogging. You see, when we leapfrog, we move from one technology to another without going through all the other processes. It's going to be extremely very difficult because so far as AI is concerned, we have to be there day one. And the reason why we have to be there day one is because we have to push the narrative as Africans. We have to be able to have a system that mirror image our culture, not that of the West, or not some bias that is intrinsic in, you know, folks who basically write these things out from the West and looking at the continent of Africa not to be, you know, as serious as it should be. We have to be the one writing the systems. We have to be the one feeding the data into the systems. Let it be our data, let it be our systems, and let it reflect who we are as Africans.
Exactly, like you said, Africa needs to take that bold step to be able to realize all this. Now, KOHTEM, in your opinion, you have listened to what your co-panelists had to say. Adding to that, how can Africa, especially its youth, utilize all the opportunities it has to be able to harness its own growth and development?
Please come again. The network has not been the best, maybe.
Unfortunately, like we are discussing technology, and of course, this is such some of the shortcomings of technology. Now, like I was asking, adding to what your co-panelists had to say, how can Africa's youth utilize all the opportunities that are available for it to be able to harness its own growth and possibly development?
To that, I'll be very honest with you. We also need to look at the level of understanding, the level of awareness of the African youth as per these technologies. Because most of the times there is a problem, which this is what I always have as a problem with the African youth. Most of the times, the technologies that the African youth actually embrace as or some of these aspects are those which are not in the right position that they need to. Because the technological aspect of Africa has not been what they actually embrace is not what is in other continents and in other places being useful to them. I don't know if, because it's really a worrying situation. Some Africans to the world, I do not want to generalize, there are a lot of young people in Africa who understand what the technological the importance of technological advancement, the importance of this technology, what it should be used for and what it should be used for. But it's really a disturbing problem to see that there are a lot of young people in Africa who don't really understand what are the use of this technological advancement, how it needs to be important to them. No, for example, you want to look at the online marketing, you want to look at online sales, it's same thing, and the online platforms which are being used for different, not only for marketing, even for educational purposes. How many of the young people in Africa are aware of these opportunities? It is a very big problem. So I think that it is the place where there's some sort of need for more sensitization, for more push for them to understand the importance of this technological advancement and what it is, how they need to take use of it, unlike what some of them are using it for. So they see a long way to go as to when the African continent is concerned.
Exactly, there is a long way to go. Now, Dr. Stanley, there exists what we call the digital divide, and it remains a significant challenge in Africa with limited access to technology as well as connectivity in many regions. You cut it across the African continent, but however, AI has the potential to bridge this said gap, the gap of digital divide, by fostering digital inclusion among African youths. Now we have mobile-based AI applications that have been existent over time before reaching the African continent, and these are providing access to essential services. Let's just reiterate that you are the CEO of a Christian FinTech. And now with this in mind, these AI applications provide services in terms of healthcare, information, financial services, meteorological services, as well as agricultural advice, like you mentioned in one of your contributions. And now with this in mind, how would AI address this current challenge of a digital divide in the continent that has mostly a population of youths?
What is... Okay, well, the digital divide, actually, it's one of those things where the only way for us to actually bridge this is going to be in an environment where we have robust data centers, internet connectivity, with fiber links that links major cities and rural areas. That's the only way we cut across this. And then we probably might start using satellite systems, especially in terrains in Africa that is hard to reach. And so we might get with some, and I think that companies like, I think it's called Starlink, they're doing great work right now in relationship to, feeding African countries with Elon Musk, internet connectivity. Some of those cases I've seen has been with schools and hospitals, and I think that this is great. we can actually be able to quantize, especially when it comes to AI in relationship to its use case. Right now, we are basically at the infancy so far as AI is concerned, so we are looking at, just individual systems. We have not gotten to the level of general artificial intelligence, where we're looking at, a mass scale where a particular system can be able to make multiple decisions. We are just looking at singular decisions right now. And what that benefits us is in the areas of hospitals, in the areas of transportation, in the areas of agriculture. And, for example, in agriculture, you can have a drone that is loaded with a pictorial AI that can be able to interpret pictures, and then it flies over a farm, and then based upon the imaging that is developed from the farm, it will be able to tell the farmer, where they need more fertilizer, whether, the crops is suffering from, some kind of pest infection and all of that. So that's what that systems will be able to do, and those are some of the applications in the areas of agriculture. The primary objective is that if we are even going to be able to actually harness and understand this on the broader scale, we actually need to still be linked up. There is no other way to be linked up, either by satellite or by terrestrial lines. We need to be able to link up one way or the other, and that is the only way in which we can have access into data centers and then be able to have, the full power of these centers. What use is it to have a data center in the country when those who are trying to be able to have access to the data center do not have fiber optic connections to be able to link them to the data center? So if the data center is only as good as the lines that comes into that particular data center, we have to be able to make sure that the total infrastructure is in place. Artificial intelligence is not just going to come and then, out of thin air, and then we need to have some kind of connectivity for us to be able to actually benefit from artificial intelligence, especially at its infancy. And that's where we are right now in its development process.
Exactly. Now, to proceed, ladies and gentlemen, if you're just tuning in, this is a talking point over your Pan-African channel for you Media Africa. Like we're discussing with our guests, the topic of today is AI and productivity, and we're asking how this will impact the reasoning faculty, or better still, the IQ of Africa's youth. Now, joining us all the way from the U.S. is Dr. Stanley, and our guest equally, KOHTEM PRINCEWIL SAMBIT, who is joining us all the way from Russia. Back to you, KOHTEM. Now, we've been citing a lot of positive aspects, positive impacts of AI on the African continent. But do we still have some existing loopholes, like some existing stumbling blocks that needs to be addressed? KOHTEM, are you with us? Unfortunately, we are unable to connect with KOHTEM Princely, who is a youth leader, about channel this next this question to Dr. Stanley. Now, like you are a tech expert with everything on ground, with the analysis you have brought to the table, now do you think there are some existing stumbling blocks that need to be addressed for a better implementation of AI on the African continent?
The reality is that the tech sector in Africa, it's literally suffering, not because we don't have tech experts. If you look across the world, you'll realize that we have plenty of tech experts that are of African origin. As a matter of fact, they are leading in Google, they are leading at Facebook, they are doing a lot of, they're leading a lot of tech companies around the world, and they are Africans, first generation Africans. And so the reality is that we need to be able to also bring most of these tech experts back home. But here's the kicker: most of these guys are coming back onto the continent with great ideas. They're coming back. I mean, what do you need from somebody who's worked at Google? What do you need from somebody who's worked at Facebook? What do you need from somebody who's been a lead engineer, in some tech firm in America or in Europe? But the problem with the African, mindset is this, that they rather pick somebody who has, been politically expedient, for their political cause, and place that person in, to run the Ministry of Telecommunications, for example. Meanwhile, that person knows nothing about, anything about technology. I mean, zero, nothing about technology. So we have these people running these systems, or running these ministries, that knows absolutely nothing about anything, and then yet we are sitting there and asking ourselves, why is it that we are lacking the way we are lacking? telecommunications is just one. You can go across the board and see, in the healthcare sector. You can just go across the board. The idea is this: we have to be able to revamp the way we think, the way we do things, bring people who are experts at what they do, who have the skill sets to be able to take us from where we are to where we ought to be. This will not happen in a vacuum. It has to be integrated. There has to be some kind of what I would consider a horizontal integration, and there has to be that horizontal integration. And the reason for that is, a couple of days ago, a young man basically, I think, commented on one of our posts, one of the videos that I think was the video as a post that you had online. I was looking at it, and he was talking about the fact that we were kind of leapfrogging, the same idea on what Africa needed, but he was basically stating, the processes and the steps that we need to go through before we start talking about what's possible on the African continent. The reality is we don't have the time to wait on the sideline, and basically, go back from level 1 and then before we start climbing up to whatever level we want to be in. The reality is the world is moving, technology is advancing. So we have to have some kind of a horizontal integration rather than the lateral integration. This is term in business. We have to find ways in which we basically move in as fast as we can, take what is working, and then maybe take that model into something else that we've been having difficulties with, and then do that horizontal integration, even though they might not be that related, but somewhat they're always related, so that we can actually be able to move forward. For example, if the healthcare industries have applications that they think is useful, then instead of them waiting for whenever, the telecom sector will basically has its mind together, they basically says, wait a minute, this is what we're looking for, this is what we want, and then in that way there's some kind of a horizontal integration. We need to be able to have this on the African continent, with that which is going to be very difficult waiting, from somebody, to sit over on the seat of power who does not even know what's happening, to be able to tell us, those who are in this field, who are in this space, who are building applications, we know what to do. That will be quite challenging for the African youth. It will be quite challenging for AI on the African continent. It will be challenging for us to have the internet connectivity we are looking for. It will be challenging for all of us to be able to emerge and become, to have our place, our stake, so far as AI is concerned worldwide.
Exactly, and this is some of the stumbling blocks we're evoking while proposing solutions in the course of today's edition. Now we just got indications that KOHTEM is back with us. Now, KOHTEM, like I was asking your co-panelists, what are some of the existing stumbling blocks that will actually hinder this implementation of AI, and of course the implementation with, of course, the African youth taking part in this process on the African continent. Now, as a youth leader, how do you assess this? KOHTEM, are you with us? Well, unfortunately, it seems a connection is not favorable with regards to how we would be getting to KOHTEM. And now we are gradually coming to the end of today's edition. Now, Dr. Stanley, with all this in mind, what suggestions can be made with regards to the implementation of AI and how the youths can help in fostering Africa's development?
Well, you see, there's a lot of talk out there, especially when it comes to young people, about how AI is going to basically take their jobs. That conversation is not the African conversation. That conversation does not fly on the African continent. The reason is because most of the jobs that even AI has the capacity of taking, we don't even have people filling those jobs. So you can't say AI is going to take your job when you are not educated in any of those fields, that AI applications will be useful in those fields, talk less of taking your job. So we need to be able to have young people who understands that they have to be able to be in partnership with artificial intelligence, in partnership with AI applications, basically learn some codings, immerse yourself in as much as you can. If you're those who are interested in the blockchain technologies, you probably want to immerse yourself in it as much as you can. Machine learning, do whatever it takes so that you can become ready, so that because the reality is, whether we like it or not, there'll be new sets of jobs. When the whole entire internet boom, started, there was a talk in the United States about how a lot of folks were going to lose jobs, how computers was going to take over their jobs. But the internet boom came with a lot of jobs. All right, so there's a lot of creation of new jobs. There will be creation of new jobs. Things will change. We'll just do things a little bit differently. And so if that was going to be the case, the young or the youth on the African continent needs to be able to tie into this now and do it early. And I think that if that was going to be the case, we will be able to see a robust Africa, okay, when it comes to our AI, tech sector, and we'll be able to see a lot of applications that most young Africans, young entrepreneurs on the African continent will be able to develop, so that it can enhance our lives on the continent. And why not? Why not lead the world? We are leading the world outside of the continent anyway. Why not just lead the world from the continent?
Exactly. While leading the continent, I would like to reiterate this statement made by KOHTEM whilst quoting the Russian president that Africa is a continent for tomorrow. To wrap up this edition of a Talking Point, Dr. Stanley. Now, with this in mind, could you give your closing remarks with regards to today's topic of discussion?
I'm thinking that Africa is ripe. Africa is absolutely, the place for us to actually be able to have, fresh data that is meaningful, that is not being corrupted by, politics and all kinds of ideologies like we have in the West. So we have a perfect ecosystem on the African continent for the development of AI. And reasons being that we are absolutely lacking, which is a bad thing, but in more ways it's actually good. Reasons being the data we develop will be data in real time. It will be real data. We don't have to rely on data outside of the continent, to have systems on the continent that will predict, or give us answers to what is it that we are looking for. I think that we need to be able to have our own artificial intelligence that is built in our own likeness, in our own image. We need to be able to have an AI system that thinks, talk, and breathe Africa. That absolutely is us first, and then anybody else can come in any order. And the reason is because if you think I'm joking, try using ChatGPT. And then basically state some certain things in ChatGPT, and you realize that the system will tell you that it cannot answer the question, or the system will tell you to basically just shut up. It's happened to me. I asked the system a question on ChatGPT, and all I was trying to know is democracy, good for Africa or not? I mean, the stuff, you would think it was a human behind that stuff scolding me. It told me to basically, what are you talking about? Well, the reality is we have to be able to have a system that is quite open-minded, with the ideas that is talking to a people who are asking legitimate questions, and the data that is input into the system to which it is that these answers will be derived out of, which is machine learning will have to understand, has to come also from an African perspective. It has to be created by Africans. Data must be derived from Africans who are on the continent, who fully understands what it means to be on the continent, rather than having data that's from outside. So in that case, the ecosystem is ripe. I think that Africa is the right place. I think that the destination for AI is Africa, and all we need to do is have the infrastructure in place so that we can be able to have young people flourish and build a robust system that will make the world proud.
Exactly. It's all about making the world proud, most especially the African continent. Thank you immensely, Dr. Stanley FONGOD, for your contribution in today's edition of Talking Point. Let's just reiterate that you are Pan-Africanist, a techpreneur, the CEO of Christian FinTech. Thank you. Thank you so much for having me, Sharon, and thank our viewers as well. We equally acknowledge the contribution and presence of KOHTEM PRINCEWIL SAMBIT, who was a youth leader that took part in today's edition all the way from Russia. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen, for taking part in today's edition of Talking Point of your #1 Pan-African channel. Meanwhile, we should say that the African youth has a place or role to play in terms of advancing the project or the development of the African continent. On that note, that we will say that African youths to stay resilient. Of course, the African continent is the continent for tomorrow. To stay in company of our programs. Bye-bye.